Hey guys, Abel here, back with another video. I hope everybody's doing well, and in today's video I will be talking about why you're not making gains, or you're not making gains as fast as you should. What are some potential reasons? And the gyms being closed due to the virus does not count in this case. I will be talking about other reasons, and I think I have 5, but I may have counted it wrong. And let's start out with the first one right away, and that is you may have picked the wrong parents, i.e. genetics. Now, I'm not necessarily implying here that you have bad genetics. You might actually have perfectly normal genetics. The problem could be, however, that you're comparing yourself to people who have way better than average genetics. Probably you're following a lot of people on Instagram or on YouTube, and you think that they have average genetics and they represent the norm. But that's probably not the case, because most people who become fitness influencers or coaches are usually pretty gifted people. Of course, there is also the issue of steroid use here and there, but let's assume that that's not the case now. Usually the people who become professionals in this field are those that responded very favorably to training in the beginning. They got way bigger than all their friends and they were like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so passionate about this. I want to work in this field. So if you think that you should be looking like them because they are the average, probably you are mistaken. They are not the average. They are way more gifted than most people. So you could still be making really good gains even though you're not looking like your favorite influencers. Just to illustrate how bad this actually got in the industry, Eric Helms, and I'll put up a couple of pictures here, take a good look at these. Eric Helms is considered by many as someone who has gotten far in bodybuilding even though he has bad genetics. Let me tell you, Eric Helms does not have bad genetics. Eric might have average genetics for competitive bodybuilding standards, but for the general population, Eric Helms has, by all accounts, better than average genetics. Now, the second point is very closely related, and that is you might have unrealistic expectations about the rate of progress that you should be seeing. So there are a lot of figures floating around out there about how much muscle you should be putting on in your first and second and third year, and pretty much I have referenced them at some point as well. So you will see things like in your first year, you could be gaining 20 to 25 pounds of muscle. In your second year, it could be 10 to 12 pounds of muscle. In your third year, 5 to 7 pounds of muscle. And what you should know about these figures is that these are more like a theoretical maximum rather than a requirement for you to consider your gains to be good. I mean, I will hear things like, yeah, I mean, we shouldn't overcomplicate things. I mean, let's get real. The average guy is probably looking to put on about 40 pounds of muscle. 40 pounds of muscle, that's 18 kilos. That's a monstrous amount of muscle. I mean, I will put up a picture of myself and there's maybe a 20 to 22 pound difference between the two pictures. And you can see that even 20 pounds or 10 kilos of muscle difference is a huge difference. So if you put on 40 pounds of muscle, that is crazy. Now, there are people who can and will put on that much muscle, but once again, that's far from being a requirement for you to consider yourself to be making really good gains. The people who put on that much muscle are usually either people with really good genetics or people who were just very, very under-muscled to begin with because they were just super inactive and they were truly, truly untrained in the true sense of the word. So just to put this into perspective, if in 5 to 7 years you achieve a fat-free mass index of 22 to 22.5 with average or maybe even slightly above average genetics, you have done great. That is an excellent, excellent level of muscularity to achieve. If you get to that level of muscle mass, you will look awesome for most people. If you take your shirt off on the beach, people will be like, wow, dude, like you really worked out. People will refer to you as, Jimmy, the muscly guy. To put that into perspective, that would be for a guy at the height of 5'10 to maybe 5'11, around 185 to 190 pounds at a body fat percentage of 15%. And at a legitimate body fat percentage of 15%, not like, well, I don't have any abs, I'm probably around 15%. No, at a legit 15% body fat, 185 to 190 pounds. That's very, very impressive. Now, let's take 40 pounds off of that. that would be 145 to 150 pounds of muscle. Now, are there people that are that light at a height of 5'10 to 5'11? Well, there are, but they are not the norm, right? Those would be the guys that were always the skinny guys in high school or in college. Yes, those guys, if they get into a serious resistance training program and they have average or slightly above average genetics, they will get to a place where they put on 40 pounds of muscle. And that is a real thing. But if you were someone who was pretty active before you started lifting seriously, if you participated in gym class in high school, if you played soccer with your friends here and there, if you could do like 20 solid push-ups, maybe 10 solid chin-ups, then you might have to be content with only 25 pounds of muscle gained. And that is still very, very impressive. Now, let's assume that the expectations that you have are realistic. Now, let's get into some other reasons why you might not making the gains that you should be making. The first thing that I very commonly see is program hopping. So changing up your training program super frequently. Why is that a problem? Well, there are a number of potential reasons that we could talk about. Excessive muscle damage if you switch up exercises all the time, a lot of nuances. But the biggest thing is, if you're doing something new every couple of weeks, you can never actually evaluate whether what you're doing is working well or not. You see, it will take at least 2 to 3 weeks, but more like 4 to 5 weeks until you can actually evaluate the effectiveness of your training program. Anybody can get you to progress for 4 weeks or 5 weeks on a new program if they give a new set of exercises to you, a new training frequency, a new training volume. You will be making decent progress for 4 weeks. After about the first month, you will hit your first smaller roadblocks. Your lifts will stall out here and there. You will not be making as linear of a progress. And that's the point where we start refining what you're doing. That's when we start troubleshooting a couple of things. Maybe you're not doing enough volume. Maybe you're doing too much volume. Maybe this lift is not as suitable for you as we thought. Maybe it was okay in the beginning, but for heavier loading, this exercise is just not suitable for you. Maybe this rep range is not sustainable for you in the long term. This is the point where we start refining things so that we set you up for good gains for months and years to come. But if you always switch up your program completely, then you never get to this stage, but you remain in this eternal trial and error phase. Now, the thing is, for more experienced people who really know the ins and outs of their bodies, they know what types of volumes and frequencies and intensities their bodies respond to the best. They are familiar with their injury sensitivity. They know their connective tissue, what tends to piss it off, what works well. For them, they can get away with some amount of program hopping, because even if they switch their routine up more frequently than what would be advised, even then we can be pretty sure that they won't just jump onto something that is completely nonsensical. For more beginner people, novice to intermediate people, it just bites them in the ass a lot more. And that's sort of the irony of the whole thing, is that the people that are the most prone to be doing dumb shit are the ones that are getting bitten in the ass by the dumb shit the most. And I can tell you anecdotally that when I see someone who has been hitting the gym for a couple of years and has very little to show for it, this is one of the most common patterns that I see. So I'm not even thinking about their genetics at this point, because all I can tell from this is that at the very least, they are not so gifted that they could still make great gains while program hopping all over the place. Now, the next thing is basically the two sides of the same coin, and that is too much or too little complexity. So the first extreme is, I see some people that have barely started training, they have barely made any gains, but their routines and their programming is so complicated that I'm like, man, you barely started training and it's so complex that some people will never get to this level of complexity by the end of their training journey. So their programming is like, okay, so I'm going to periodize this thing here and I'm going to insert this phase after a couple of weeks. And after that, I will be programming in these exercises and these training techniques, and then I'm going to remove them. And it's like, there is nothing inherently wrong with any of this, but the more complexity you add to a system, the more room there will be for error. And the thing is, before you have gained enough training experience, you just don't know how to implement all of this properly. And you will be just super prone to messing something up. And the thing is, when you mess something up, there are just so many moving parts in your programming that you just won't know what to actually troubleshoot. And even if you ask for help from someone, they will be confused too, because there are so many things that could have potentially gone wrong. So I think that when you're starting out, for the first couple of years, you should be doing something that is more than likely to work based on science, but also based on just many, many years of experiential knowledge, is easy to track and easy to troubleshoot. So I think you should be doing something with a moderate amount of volume, not too little, not too much, something with a pretty close failure proximity. You don't have to train to failure. In fact, I would not recommend to train to failure all the time, but a relatively close failure proximity, something that is easy to track, easy to troubleshoot. And then when you actually hit a roadblock, it's pretty easy to see what went wrong because there are not so many moving parts in your programming. Now, the other extreme, though, is the complete opposite of that, and that is when someone says, you know what, all this complicated shit that people do in the gym, you should just go to the gym 3 times a week, do some heavy bench presses and chin-ups and rows for your upper body, some squats and deadlifts for your lower body, and that's it. And then, oh my god, you're doing bicep curls? What a pussy, just do heavy rows and chin-ups, your biceps will grow. You're doing lateral raises? What a pussy, just do some heavy overhead presses, your delts will grow. And it's like, you know what, I get all of that. Your biceps will grow from chin-ups, your delts will grow from overhead presses, but doing some curls will help to grow your biceps even more. Doing some lateral raises will help to grow your delts even more. If you also do some pec flies, it will help to hit the portion of the pecs which are not being hit by bench presses. And are we suffering more downsides by including these things than we are gaining benefits? I wouldn't think so. And the thing is, if you're dragging your ass to the gym 3 days a week, is it gonna kill you to do a couple of more sets? I mean, if you have the time to do 5 sets for a body part, you also have the time to do 10. And the thing is, I can definitely see the appeal of these training approaches. I think especially for us guys, there is something about this approach that resonates with us deep down. The idea that you don't have to overcomplicate anything. You don't have to lift these light dumbbells for lateral raises. You don't have to do sets of 20. You only have to just get under a heavy barbell, do a couple of heavy sets, and you will be huge. I think that is something that resonates in the heart with all of us. But even though I am a fan of being minimalistic for the sake of being minimalistic, not so much. And then the last thing is just being very inconsistent with your nutrition. So this is something I covered a whole bunch of times, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. But if you're perma-cutting, if you're chronically chasing the goal of being super lean, if you're alternating between huge calorie surpluses and then crash dieting periods, then that is going to hold you back. Always being in a calorie deficit is obviously not going to be super good for your recovery. But then if you're always alternating between these big surplus and deficit periods, then your recovery is just going to be all over the place. And once again, you just won't be able to track anything. Because when you're in a surplus, then in theory, your recovery ability should be better. You could be doing more volume, but then you go into a deficit, then your recovery is going to be hampered again. So it's just all inconsistent, and you will just never be able to get into a nice flow and a nice rhythm with your lifting. So that's one more reason to fix these things as early as you can. Try to find some consistency. Have dedicated periods when you're in a long gaining phase, you're fueling yourself, you're optimizing your recovery. And then when it's time to lose fat, get that done efficiently, not rushing the process, but get it done as fast as you can, but not faster. And then you want to return to gaining as soon as you can. That is really the way to go if you want to be making the most efficient gains that you can. So those would be pretty much the 5 reasons that I wanted to say. So first of all, obviously, we have to address the expectations side of things. If you have really unrealistic expectations, then you could be actually making really good gains. You're just thinking that you're making shit gains because your expectations are not realistic. And then we can talk about all of these practical things that you might be getting wrong. Nevertheless, I hope that this video was helpful. And I hope that these days more and more people can return to the gym and enjoy that lovely environment. For me, I still have to wait for that, but I try to be happy for you guys and give my virtual strength to you when you're hitting the iron this way. At any rate, I want to thank you for your attention. Subscribe for more videos like this, and like the video if you liked it. Comment, ask questions, whatever, and we will see each other in the next video.